A North Korean general fighting with Russian forces has been wounded in a recent Ukrainian airstrike in the Kursk area. This is the first time Western officials are confirming that a high-ranking North Korean military officer has been injured in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Officials have not confirmed how the North Korean general was wounded, but more than 10,000 North Korean troops are currently deployed in Russia's Kursk region. The White House is condemning Russia's use of North Korean soldiers, even warning last month they could be targeted by Ukrainian forces. Back in October, John Kirby, spokesperson for the National Security Council, said that North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine will become fair game and fair targets for the Ukrainians. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and Senior Fellow Military Expert at Defense Priorities, Daniel Davis, joins me. Good evening, sir. And now we're learning that Russia notified the U.S. before firing missiles into Ukraine, ballistic missiles into Ukraine. Why would Russia notify the U.S. first before doing it?
Well, listen, this is a very strong signal because it came in conjunction with a statement that Vladimir Putin made to his population tonight, that it's supposed to send a very strong signal, because this wasn't just any ballistic missile. It was one of their newest ones, an RS-26, an intermediate range ballistic missile, according to what Putin said in there, which has maneuverable warheads and multiple warheads on a single missile. And this one was conventionally armed, but he said they also come in nuclear capable. He also pointed out that the signal was that you don't have any air defenses against this. It's 10 times, it flies at Mach 10, which is faster than anything we can shoot down. And if we continue to fire long-range missiles, either the U.S. or U.K., into Russia, it's possible that they reserve the right, so he said, to attack into our own countries against missiles, with missiles that cannot be interdicted. And that was the big signal he intended to send.
Well, you know, it's sort of interesting because it's sort of on the heels of Putin changing when they use nuclear weapons. Some of the Russian nuclear doctrine or something has lowered it to use it in more instances, which people thought was just sort of propaganda and saber rattling by Putin. But this does seem to be more than saber rattling when he's using this particular missile, which could have a nuclear warhead on it. It didn't. But I mean, and notifying the U.S., it does seem to up the ante and not just to be sort of propaganda coming from Putin.
Well, it does. And this is actually the announcement itself that you referred to was the formal signature of Putin from a speech that he made in late September, when the first announcement that Zelensky was actually in town for the UN General Assembly, seeking permission from the United States and the Western powers to use long-range weapons. And then he made his declaration then that if that happened, then it would lower the threshold for nuclear use. And then he certified that, a couple of days ago, I guess, as we used these missiles actually on the ground. And so I agree with you that this is a bigger issue because it's not just words, it follows with actions. And by all we've seen so far, and I've talked to some ballistic experts, we don't have the capacity to shoot these down. And if they're used against us, it would represent a significant threat.
Why did he wait till now? Is it because they're horribly expensive? I mean, he's brought in the 10,000, 11,000 North Korean troops, and of course, Kim Jong-un doesn't care if his people get killed. I mean, he has no regard for his people, and he's got a million-member military back home. But why would Putin do this now? And we're sort of in the window between an election and a new president.
Well, because we have to look at the context that it's going in. Russia, for the most of this calendar year, has been methodically grinding down the Ukraine military. And if things continued on, the Ukraine would eventually lose the war. There is no more chance to reverse this on the ground militarily. So Russia doesn't need to escalate it. But when the U.S. and Biden said, you know what, now that I'm going to go ahead and allow these long-range weapon systems to be used, I'm going to allow these landmines that we had previously not been willing to use, then Russia said, all right, that crossed the line, because that could represent a threat to them deeper in their strategic rear areas where it's important. And so from Putin's perspective, we crossed that line first, and now this is his retaliation from it, because otherwise he would have no interest in doing that, because he does not want a war with the West. But he is signaling that if we keep pushing, he is willing to take it to the next level.
What's the win for Putin? Does he get all that sort of Ukrainian land that he wants, or he gets some sort of commitment that Ukraine isn't going into NATO? Or, I mean, at this point, you know, what's the win for Putin, and what's the win for Ukraine?
Yeah, his objective, Putin has not changed since before the war actually started, which is he wants a neutral, non-aligned Ukraine on his border because he said anything else represents an existential threat, and we don't have to agree with it. But if he believes it and
is
acts
that
on it,
true?
we have to be aware of it, and that's what he has said from the beginning. That's what all of the negotiations that he's tried to have would result in a new non-aligned military for the Ukrainian side, and that's his objective now. If he can get it with negotiations with Trump, he will take that, I think. I think there is a deal to be made, but if a deal can't be found, then he has the capability. This is really important to understand. He has the capacity to win on the battlefield what he would otherwise take on negotiations, and that is his ultimate objective, is to secure his western border.
Yeah, but I mean, how do you factor in the fact that in 2014 he took Crimea? I mean, and then 10 years passed or 8 years passed. I mean, why did he take Crimea, and why did he keep Crimea?
Well, he took Crimea because there was a civil war broke out in Ukraine, which, some call it a coup, some call it another revolution, which we backed. So you can call it whatever you want. But the bottom line is one of the really emotional issues for the Russian side was the Russian speakers in the Donbass, in the far eastern part of Ukraine. And they essentially went to civil war with the western part of Ukraine against the eastern part. Russia did help the eastern part to hold on to it. And by the way, the Crimea part was actually had not been Ukraine even as recently as I think it was 1991, and it was 95% Russian. And so they took this opportunity because they have the Sevastopol Black Sea Fleet is headquartered there, and they were not about to let that fall into NATO hands.
Lieutenant Colonel, I've got to go. Their clock's going to cut me off. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you, sir, and we'll be right back.
Always my pleasure.